Alright, we are live. Good enough. Alright. Welcome to Lessons Learned, a business unit of Gooseworks. A second channel to a main channel that I have not posted on yet. Main channel progress begins once I learn how to do FEA in FreeCAD, because those bastards at Dassault decided to not put FEA into the SolidWorks for Makers license. Alright, first take. This one won't be controversial at all. You know, because Falkland War was 40-something years ago. British definitely don't care now. The Argentinians wouldn't. Don't know why they would. It's not like the only thing they did in the last couple decades other than, you know, that other thing. What if I told you that there is a non-nuclear missile so powerful and effective that it changed naval warfare forever, and only 5 of them somehow managed to turn the tide of a war against the British Navy at the time when they had a navy, before they decided that all they needed were American nukes, while saying we were big meanies for having nukes, but that's beside the point. This missile was wasting warships of navies that really should have known better. The aforementioned UK and, unfortunately, the United States. If you were alive in the 80s, know who Margaret Thatcher is, or you're a crazed Argentinian nationalist, which seemed to be a non-zero number of you, you already know what I'm talking about. It is the Exocet missile. My autism, I get to choose the hyperfixation. So strap in, get your goodies. Hopefully I can stretch this to 45 minutes so it matches the time of your commute. I know. You should be really looking at the road right now. It's not good to watch a YouTube video, even if you're just listening when you're driving your car. What if an ad starts? What are you going to do then? Are you going to buy YouTube Premium? No, you're not. You should be listening to my video while you're supposed to be being productive at work. You have an AirPod in under your headset. It's my permission to do that. Go ahead. So the Exocet missile is an anti-ship missile originally designed in 1967 by Aerospatiale. It's a French company, if you couldn't tell. I do not give a fuck if I pronounce that wrong. I am not even going to check. It can be launched from either land or air by your fixed-wing gun truck of choice, such as the F-15 or the Mirage or the super tard French plane. Once again, I'm not going to look up the name of that or how to pronounce it. Fuck you. Fuck you, France. What made the Exocet missile so special is how it evaded radar. It was a sea-skimming missile, staying only 1 to 2 meters above the waterline, and only turned on active radar when it was at the final stages of its approach, relying on inertial navigation until then to prevent detection by their target. Seems kind of obvious now, but this was 1967. They're just figuring out missiles. The low altitude and inertial navigation meant it was very difficult to detect this missile via radar until it switched on the active homing in its final phase. Its final phase happened a little under 4 miles from the target. This may seem like very far away, but for missile defense, that's like right in front of you. The missile's top speed is 713 nautical miles per hour, which meant that 4 miles out, the target ship had a whole 20 seconds before they were hit. Plenty of time to acquire the target, launch an air defense missile, and, you know, hope the impact wasn't so close to hit you anyway. 20 seconds from, oh shit, there's a dot on the radar, to there being a giant hole in your little sailboat. So, suboptimal. Needless to say, most ships would struggle with doing any of this in 20 seconds, so when it came to the Exocet, they were basically defenseless. Not me though, I'm built different, constructed alternatively. Not better, just different. However, the first victims we're going to be talking about were the British. and unfortunately there was no keeping calm, nor carrying on. The most famous use of this missile, and the one you're probably thinking of, was how it was utilized by Argentina during the Falklands War. When things started looking hairy in the Falklands, Argentina talking about, really the island that's right next to their shoreline should belong to them and not to England, a couple 1,000 miles away. Crazy talk like that. So, when they were drumming up all that brouhaha, England knew they had these. They knew the Exocet was a threat. They had some of their own. They knew that their own ships did not have a very good defense. England knew that they could not allow Argentina to get a weapon like the Exocet. So that is where MI6 stepped in. So, how did MI6, Britain's spy agency, keep Argentina from buying anti-ship missiles? They sent them hot singles in your areas ads, or the military procurement equivalent of that. They flooded Argentina with so many fake, cheap offers for the Exocet that never panned out and wasted so much of their fucking time that by the time the war began, they only had 5. Because why do anything malicious when stupid is more effective and harder to catch? 5 doesn't sound like a lot, but as Argentina would prove, is more than enough. Following Argentina's invasion of the Falkland Islands in April of 1982, England sent out a massive naval task force to get it back, mainly just on principle. Falklands didn't really have any valuable resources or tactical advantage, but they were the fucking queens. Worth a couple hundred lives, isn't it? Gotta get it back. Can't let those fucking South Americans take it. Or let the North Americans take their colonies. They can't let it happen again. Those are the Queen's people, all 6 of them. So they set off to the Falklands with their warships and silly little playground slide aircraft carriers, because they wanted to get their desolate rocks back. Unfortunately, they would have to contend with the Executioner, the Tinian Talking Stick, the Thatcher Thrasher, all 5 of them. On May 4th, 1980, and we're back. My piece of shit Lenovo laptop decided to crash again. Deep State doesn't want me to get any of that AdSense money, that's what it is. So, on May 4th, 1982, Star Wars Day, the HMS Sheffield, a Type 42 destroyer, was on watch as missile defense for the rest of the task force. Argentinians saw them sitting out there, waiting for a missile attack, and they decided to oblige them. 2 superentards? Superentenard? Some French. Oui. 2 of those things took off from Rio Grande Naval Base. Each one was armed with an AM-39 air-launched Exocet missile. After tracking the Sheffield and making an approach at low altitude, both planes got a radar lock and fired 30 miles from the Sheffield. The first missile missed its mark, splashing into the sea a half-mile off the Sheffield's port beam. However, the second missile fared a little better. Sheffield took a hit on the starboard side on the second deck. The missile shot right through the ship, coming to a stop after breaching the forward auxiliary and engine room bulkhead 8 feet above the waterline. The warhead did not explode, but the damage was enough. The missile had started fires within the ship and had knocked out the electrical distribution system and the ship's seawater fire main. Kinda need that. The crew fought for 4 hours to contain the fire without their main firefighting system, resorting to buckets and battery-powered pumps. Eventually, the captain of the Sheffield, Captain Salt, gave the order to abandon ship. Well, the evacuated crew departed to the nearby HMS Arrow. A sub-lieutenant led the crew in singing. In a rousing rendition of "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life" from Monty Python's Life of Brian, the song they sing when they're being crucified at the end of the movie. This didn't sound real, and I had to find some other sources to confirm. But yeah, that did happen. They sang a Monty Python song whilst their ship sank. Or, well, technically it sank a few days later as the British attempted to tow it, but it was abandoned, it was gone, they lost it. Now, if you think singing a Monty Python song while you are abandoning ship after losing 20 of your fellow sailors to a missile that didn't even explode, and you're thinking it's kind of a dopey reaction, I'm afraid it gets worse. A lot worse. However, that is a later topic, because after this first successful attack, there was another. But wait, there's more. The next name on the Exocet drill record is the SS Atlantic Conveyor. The next op ready to get struck down with the Blicky Doodle, known as the Exocet missile, was the SS Atlantic Conveyor. This was an important part of the task force. It was originally a container ship that had been hastily converted to carry aircraft and other supplies on its deck. It had quite a few munitions, supplies, and helicopters on board, and earlier in the day it had most of the Harrier jets that England had brought with them, but those had been, well, good for the British, moved elsewhere in the meantime. Because once again, two Tinian supercharged planes swooped in to ruin someone's day. Once again, two planes on the approach, two Exocet missiles fired. However, the SS Atlantic Conveyor was not the first target. They were originally aimed at a nearby frigate. However, the frigate was successful in deploying their air defense measures. They fired chaff. The chaff confused the radar system in the missile, but then the missiles found a new target. Both missiles found their second secret surprise target and slammed right into the SS Atlantic Conveyor. Unlike the first time, both warheads detonated after striking their target, and like the Sheffield, the Atlantic Conveyor was lost a few days later under tow. Two more Exocet attacks would later be attempted in the Falklands, one by air against the flagship carrier, HMS Invincible, and another against HMS Glamorgan, using a naval Exocet converted to be launched from land. Because, they're already out of their 5 at that point. While the Glamorgan was struck, neither attack successfully sank their targets, and this exhausted the remaining inventory of Argentinian Exocets. Probably good for the Argentinians, because England had started planning an SAS raid to essentially invade the mainland Argentina and kill all their pilots who could shoot this thing, as well as destroy any of them that they found. That would have escalated things. However, they were out and the damage was done. The loss of the Sheffield was devastating psychologically to the British people and would lead to substantial changes in ship design and air defense at sea. The loss of the Atlantic Conveyor, however, would have a much more noticeable impact on the war. They'd actually alter the course of the entire war, as the Atlantic Conveyor carried most of the supplies and aircraft that England would need for their troops to conduct like a successful air cavalry invasion, like you saw in We Were Soldiers and all the other Vietnam movies. Fly in with the helicopters, planned airlift, fly down, invade, shoot them up, get back on the helicopters, leave. Play some old classical music and go surfing as well. Or to good old Francis Ford. No, instead they had to walk across the islands. So their quick, dynamic, light infantry air cav just became poorly equipped ground troops walking across all the islands. And while this made things far more costly and difficult for the British, the Exocets and the loss to the strike force was not enough to turn the tide in the war fully. On June 14th, 1982, hostilities would cease with Britain regaining control of the islands. To this day, they still don't agree who fucking owns them. This victory would be the boost Margaret Thatcher needed to win re-election the next year and, allow her to continue kicking puppies and consuming adrenochrome or whatever you Brits accuse her of doing. However, in Argentina, the loss would spur protests against the ruling military junta that would lead to its downfall and the democratization of the country. So, some good came out of it. I always kind of wondered what the Falklands like. That was in the 80s. And in the mid-40s to early 50s region, they're known for being the popular vacation destination for a certain group of unpopular Europeans. 40 years later, say they get over there as a young man, military service. They join up in the Argentinian military, maybe get to a command position, and maybe they're just trying to get him back for losing the Battle of Britain. There had to be at least one. Yeah, Argentina got their ass whooped. They had to leave. They overthrow their military government and bring in democracy on their own. I think there's a lesson in there for the United States. Things always went great in the invasions and much less great when we started trying to nation build. Maybe we should just kick their asses real bad and then left for them to do the rest themselves, if they wanted to. Who gives a shit about power vacuum? It happened anyway. Yeah, this short war wouldn't just affect its two players. Every third world dictator with missile money would soon start ordering these, and all the countries with navy money realized they had a big problem. The biggest effect of the Exocet and its role in the farce in the Falklands was it identified a critical flaw in naval air defense. What happens when the threat is detected when it's too close to launch a proper response? This was the genesis of CIWS, Close-In Weapon Systems, a god-awful acronym that's not even pronounced in the order that it's spelled. This whole topic bothers me so much that I'll be making my next video about it. Stay tuned for that. Yeah, it's CIWS, but it's pronounced CWIS. CWIS. The I is supposed to be in front, you fuckers. Alright. That's for the other video. Right now, let me compose myself. So the Close-In Weapon System is a last resort system designed to cover the last mile or two around a ship after something has gotten past the more effective longer range air defense. Missile attack, watercraft, anything that's close to your boat won't be for much longer with one of these things on board. They come in two flavors, guns and missiles, and there's one that stands above all the others. The cream of the crop, brother. It is the Phalanx CWIS. I pronounce that KIWS, because that's how that acronym is supposed to be. Phalanx CIWS, brought to you by your tax dollars via Raytheon. It is a standalone radar-guided 20mm Vulcan minigun. Its radar is self-contained on that little R2-D2 cylinder up top. This means that it can be put onto any ship with the space for it. No need for any kind of special mounting or space reservation other than, deck space. And no need for an expensive ship's radar that you have to interface and deal with that. It has its own. You just put it on the ship. Easy. These things are popular. You can find these fuckers on just about any US naval surface combatant and most of our allies. It's ready to shoot down the one Houthi missile that they let in for fun, or that civilian airliner we talked about. Don't worry, Phalanx, Aegis did it for real. I think you just almost did it. The Phalanx and other systems like it provided a much-needed last-ditch defense against the Exocet and other surface skimming missiles like it. But even a system like the Phalanx can't save you from stupid, as the United States would soon find out. So, the year's 1987. The Berlin Wall fell, and then the Reagan administration kind of fell there for the Iran-Contra scandal, same year. And also, Iraq and Iran were at war over the new Ayatollah Khomeini who overthrew the Shah of Iran, US-backed. Keep track here, that'll be important later for my schizo rant at the end. Yeah, Khomeini had overthrown the Shah in Iran, instituted a theocracy, dictatorship, whatever. Wanted to do the same in Iraq, and our boy Saddam Hussein did not like that. However much we didn't like the Ba'athist government, they were allegedly secular-ish. We were backing Saddam on this one. But yeah, Ayatollah Khomeini was trying to stir shit up in Iraq after doing so in Iran. Cycle continues, still doing that shit this year. But they were about to make it America's problem. On May 17th, 1987, the USS Stark was patrolling in the Persian Gulf due to both Iraq and Iran attacking commercial shipping in the area during this little squabble. Despite this mission to prevent missile attacks and reports of jet activity in the area, the Stark was operating in a low-threat posture. Phalanx system and the chaff dispensers were in standby, turned off completely. There was no full watch staff, and no one monitored the radar. Odd thing to do for a ship sailing into a war zone, right? Ship sailing into a war zone that was there to interdict attacks on other shipping vessels. Odd thing to have your air defense turned off. Unknown to them at the time, an Iraqi jet was on approach, saying Iraq. They ain't no Iraq or Iran. No, it's Iraq and Iran. Fuck you. Unknown to them, an Iraqi jet fighter was on approach. However, not a jet fighter as it turns out. Reporting at the time thought it was a Mirage 1, but later investigation has found that it was actually a Falcon 50 business jet, which was actually worse. You see, this business jet had been updated with a combat radar system and 2 hardpoints for air-launched Exocet missiles, as opposed to the Mirage's 1. Not only did it have the radar cross-section of not a fighter jet, but it was actually better armed than the ones they had. It's a totally normal and sane thing to do, Iran. Why not put the missiles on business jets instead? Fuckers. So the Falcon was carrying 2 of our favorite anti-ship missiles, the Exocet. And allegedly they had mistook the Stark for an Iranian oil tanker. The U.S. naval warship. As the jet approached the Stark, they were not initially alarmed. It's unknown whether that was because they just didn't think it was a hostile jet due to the radar signature, or just no one was looking at the radar, because didn't have a full watch. Who knows? Eventually, it was picked up on the radar about 30 miles from the Stark. They radioed a warning to the Falcon, identifying themselves as a U.S. warship. They stated their location, and they requested that the jet identify themselves. They received no response, and it was at this time that they saw they had been targeted by the jet's radar, and the jet fired. Sure, it's because they thought they were an Iranian oil tanker that was just saying they were a U.S. warship in an American accent. Those pesky, tricksy Iranians. I'm not saying Iran. The missiles were fired from 22 and 15 miles away, respectively. None of the onboard countermeasures could be brought online in time, except for the Phalanx. However, the ship had maneuvered into a position that put the missiles out of the Phalanx's range of motion, so it couldn't even aim to shoot at the threat. Great they had it on board, though. It looked pretty cool, sitting there. Shame they didn't turn it on or use it well. Both missiles found their mark and struck the port side of the Stark. First missile struck like the Sheffield and failed to detonate the warhead. However, the second missile did, knocking out the electronics for the Stark's standard missile defense system. This prevented the Stark from returning fire, so unfortunately those rat bastards got away. So the Stark now has a 150 square foot hole in the side of its hull, just above the waterline. The Stark's captain, Glenn Brindell, ordered the starboard side of the ship to be flooded in order to keep the hole on the other side above the waterline. This action, along with the crew's damage control teams and support from nearby U.S. warships and other vessels, allowed the damage to be contained, and they did not have to abandon the Stark. They managed to get the Stark to Bahrain the next day, where temporary repairs allowed it to return to its home port in Florida, where it would be fully repaired. Now, if you thought we were about to have a happy ending where we go and stomp the Iraqi military, I have bad news. The Iraqis, who tried to blow up our ship, were not held accountable by the US, with President Ronald Reagan blaming it on Iran, because they were the big meanies in the war, and that's why the Stark was there. Let alone the fact that Iraq shot the missile at us. Seems kind of important. The Iraqis escaped accountability. Captain Brindell of the Stark was relieved of duty for not defending his ship, having nothing on in terms of their defensive armament in a war zone. That's pretty bad. Flag officer in charge, Admiral Burnson, was found blameless for the actions of his subordinates and continued on his post. Funny how accountability never makes it past a certain rank. So yeah. And this laughable lack of preparedness brings up a fascinating question. Is the Exocet really all that effective, or did the ships it hit just suck? First, we're going to rewind a little bit. We're going to go back to the Sheffield. Remember when I said it was going to get worse? That's now. We're going to talk about it. There's a strong argument that had the crew of the Sheffield done the bare minimum in air defense and general doing their jobs and not being complacent, they would not have lost their ship, or it wouldn't have been that bad. And had it been any other British ship, the likelihood of a successful attack would have been much lower. They did kind of draw the short end of the stick on this one. See, that's because just like the British knew what they were up against with the Exocet, because they had some of their own, so did the Argentinians with some of the British warships. Sheffield was a Type 42 destroyer, and Argentina had two of theirs of their own. So they knew everything about these Type 42 destroyers, and they even ran drills of their planes attacking their destroyers prior to the British task force even getting close to their waters. So they had drilled this exact attack. They knew exactly how to get out of the Sheffield. Their radar line of sight, they knew how to avoid that. They knew the blind spots, they knew where to hit. They knew exactly what they had to do in order to, succeed in this attack. The next step in this comedic kill chain is the comedy of errors that is the Sheffield's crew. Prior to this stationing, they were warned specifically about this exact type of attack. However, their captain felt that the threat posed by the Exocet was overrated. After MI6 ran a whole operation to keep Argentina from getting these things. Like, they're not going to use them. They'll be fine. They're not that bad. There is even a standard order in place to release chaff and begin evasive maneuvers if a code word was used on the radio indicating an Exocet threat. During the Argentinian approach, the nearby HMS Glasgow actually detected the incoming planes and warned the Sheffield with that code word. They had warning. Despite this warning and the Glasgow firing its own flares and chaff and doing their defensive maneuvers, the Sheffield did not realize or act like they were under attack until smoke from the first missile approach was visible. At this time, when they realized they were under attack, the officers on the bridge did not call the captain to the bridge. They did not give the order for the crew to report to their battle stations. They made no evasive maneuvers and made no attempt to prepare the guns and missiles on the deck. They didn't even fire the chaff. All the little fucking tinfoil showed up in like a confetti cannon. They didn't do that. The only thing they did was call the anti-air warfare officer to the bridge, who arrived just as they were hit. Hope they also called up their anti-sinking warfare officer. So between the Sheffield and the Stark, both crews were comically unprepared for the very obvious missile threat they'd been directly briefed on. Nice. And when you look at the other attacks in the Falklands, they were mostly unsuccessful, other than the Atlantic. They kind of got unlucky, because frigate they shot those missiles at, avoided them, but then they had other ideas. Yeah, they kind of got fucked up. So yeah, the question is the Exocet really some unbeatable threat, or did it just have easy targets? The answer is it's a bit of both. The real kicker with the Exocet is that this thing has been shot at more ships than any other missile like it. There just hasn't been many games of battleships since we made Volkswagen and Mitsubishi get out of the defense industry. Made a couple suns appear, and then ships didn't seem all that important. Didn't want to escalate into any large-scale naval battles or conflicts, because that's when people get angry. The Exocet isn't magic, but it is an effective design, and it's been proven in combat. That and British ships in the 80s were apparently made of paper mache. Like, I don't know what the fuck they were doing. There's no redundancy, they had one fire main pump. That's it. That got knocked out. They couldn't fight the fire at all. No redundancy. I'm going to get heated up about this. Start spurging out about ship design and vulnerability and damage. They weren't designing their ships well. I mean, this isn't even the only time it happened. Argentina was hitting them with glide bombs that weren't exploding because they fucked up the fuse distance. Those glide bombs were sinking other British ships. It was comedic. What were they doing? Alright, I'm starting to rant about ship design. I'm going to call it here before I totally spurg out on that. Subscribe to the channel, be the first. Bragging rights for later, you know, tell your friends, leave a comment. What weird, somewhat engineering-related topic do you want me to cover next? If you really want to be a fucking day one, Patreon link in the description. It gets you nothing right now, but bragging rights. Next video is coming soon. Got a few ideas already. Some short, some long, some perfectly normal, stop asking why it's curved, like that. Smell you fucks later, same bat time, same bat channel, or stay a little longer for my little schizo rant. Alright. I do say I look quite dashing in the tinfoil hat. Alright. Schizo conspiracy theory time. I think the Stark was there to be hit. We'll recap USS Stark doing air defense for commercial vehicles during the Iraq-Iran war. As we stated earlier, the US thought Iran was the big meanie in this war. And, you know, our little pookie Saddam Hussein completely blameless. However, guess what happened a year later? Another US ship hit an Iranian mine. A naval mine, unguided, left out there, presumably actually to hit one of the Iraqi or Kuwaiti oil ships. So, while they were not specifically targeted, and they were just there and they just hit the mine, the United States blamed Iran. I think they told them to, like, take it back or do something. Iran said no. And when all this happened, we didn't just brush it off and blame Iraq for aggressing. We mobilized and obliterated half of the Iranian Navy. Operation Praying Mantis. Heavier and more famous YouTubers have done that one, so I'm not going to touch it, but fascinating topic. And wouldn't you know it, the war ended later that year. So really, I think what happened, and this is I think, I've not done any research, I have nothing to back this up, just face value. I think we sent the Stark and the other ships out there to get shot at. The Stark went out with no defenses turned on into a war zone where they knew there was a missile threat, and they did nothing. And then they got hit by a missile. The only problem was wrong country. They were trying to go in there, get hit by Iran, and have an excuse to waste all the we wanted an excuse to go in and waste all the naval hardware that we had given the Shah, and probably a lot of the air power too. And, you know, help Iraq win the war and not also fall. It's for us to do a couple years later. But yeah, eventually that's what we did. We ended up doing more of these patrols until we finally got what we wanted. We hit a mine, blew up a bunch of Iranian ships. Go America. And I'm not supporting the Iranians. Fuck them. I just wish them and Iraq both lost. But yeah, thanks, Ronald. Okay, now we're done. Get out of here, go drink some water, hydrate or dihydrate. See you fuckers later.